evening and welcome to this, the January 22nd edition of Beyond the Headlines. And my name is Colin Dowe, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program. So wherever you may be joining us from, whether it is on the GBN television, GBN radio, any of our social media platforms, whether you're lying in bed, you're in your living room, you're in your kitchen, you're at one of the local bars, welcome. We are speaking Grenada, and we continue to speak Grenada, but this is a different aspect to Grenada because we're going to be speaking this evening about Grenada's maritime boundaries and, more importantly, maritime security. And I have a number of experts with me, three esteemed gentlemen who I will ask to introduce themselves and their portfolios, starting from my immediate left. Osman?
Good evening, everyone, and my name is Osman Griffith. I am the former commanding officer of the Grenada Coast Guard. I'm retired from the Royal Grenada Police Force about 10 years ago, and I still continue as a subject matter expert on maritime crime, working especially with UNODC in Africa, Indian Ocean, doing counter-piracy, teaching, mentoring, and so on down in that area. I am here tonight as a subject matter expert on maritime law enforcement.
Well, let me say welcome, and I actually expected you to be joining virtually because I know you spend so much time out of Grenada. I thought you were someplace about the continent of Africa and not an island.
No, I'm here.
Okay, good. To his left.
Well, I'm Slim Cloud, and good evening to all. I'm an attorney, well, really a barrister. I was trained in Canada, and I pursued a master's in international law of the sea at Dalhousie University. And since then, I've been occupied in different maritime activity. In particular, the delimitation of our maritime boundary with the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I was then the advisor to the Commission from Grenada, and we successfully delimited a single maritime boundary that delineates our maritime jurisdiction between Grenada and Trinidad and Tobago. So that basically I'm here to discuss maritime security, maritime safety, and maritime stewardship. That I think.
Wonderful. We don't get worried, ladies and gentlemen. We still will maintain the 90-minute limit to the program. I know it seems like broad topics and the expertise that we have with us. And to his left.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dexter Roberts, and I am an inspector of police attached to the Grenada Coast Guard. My responsibilities there are operations. I'm in charge of operations and training. So I'm here to discuss maritime security this evening because as a Coast Guard, we are front and foremost with regards to maritime security within the Tri-Island State of Grenada.
Okay, all right. And gentlemen, once again, welcome. And this is very important to Grenada and Grenadians. But Osman, let me start with you. When we refer to maritime security, what specifically are we speaking about?
All right. In the context of, let's speak in the context of Grenada. When we're speaking of maritime security in Grenada, Grenada is an island state, a small island developing state, where most of our commerce comes through maritime. You say you come to Grenada, tourism, seawater and sand, maritime. One of our biggest exports from Grenada, fish, maritime. We hear a lot about oil in our waters and stuff like that, maritime. So another thing that is trending you hear a lot about is the blue economy. And when you speak about the blue economy, you're speaking about maritime. So we have all these resources that are critical to our development, and we need to protect it. We need to safeguard it. So when we talk about maritime security, is we need to protect these resources because maritime, they're fragile. And if something happens to this, it could mean a devastating effect on our country. So when we talk about maritime security, we're talking about security in these assets, and also we also look at, you can't divorce maritime security from maritime safety. They go hand in hand.
Right.
So the two of them, you have to look at them in a context where you have to protect security and the safety of your maritime assets.
Okay. Anselm,
Yes.
what encompasses Grenada's maritime boundaries? Where is Grenada?
Yeah. Well, look, a coastal state, there's a law of the sea, and Grenada is a signatory party. We have ratified the treaty. It's an international treaty. Our jurisdiction extends to 3 specific maritime areas. One, the territorial sea, which is an extension of the sovereignty of the state, so that, for example, coastal states have innocent passage through the territorial sea, provided that they do nothing that would be adverse to the peace, order, and good governance of the state. But there's a concept of innocent passage. Warships and all ships are entitled to that. And then you have a contiguous zone. The state can exercise sovereignty also, or sovereign rights, over the contiguous zone, because it's a zone specifically designed for customs and excise. So that, assume a ship is undertaking activity in the territorial sea that is prejudicial to the state. It may be have explosive on it. It may have drugs on it. A variety of instances would constitute a breach of the order and good governance of the state. The criminal law of the country extends to the territorial sea. But beyond the territorial sea, you have a contiguous zone. That's a zone designed, it's 24 miles. It's designed for customs and excise, so that if someone is escaping from the territorial sea, where you have defined sovereign rights, so you could apprehend that ship, but you can go in hot pursuit of it, exercising the very same sovereign rights for 24 miles from the breadth of the territorial sea. So you have an additional 24 miles. And then from the contiguous zone, you have the exclusive economic zone. Now, this is a zone specifically designed, as the commandant said, for economic activity, the living and non-living resources of the 200 miles. The difficulty we have, however, is that our islands, our geographical expression are as such that you cannot effectively get 200 nautical miles on the Caribbean side of Grenada. But on the Atlantic side, with the exception of Barbados, you can have a 200 miles exclusive economic zone. And that zone is designed for exploitation of the living and the non-living resources of the zone, i.e. oil and gas, as the case may be. With respect to Venezuela, when we negotiated the delimitation of our maritime boundary with Trinidad and Tobago, we arrived at what is called a tripartite point. That is to say, whenever we decide to delimit our maritime boundaries with Venezuela, we are not disadvantaged, notwithstanding we have already delimited with Trinidad and Tobago, because we start at a point, as I say, tripartite, where we end with Trinidad and Tobago, and then we begin with Venezuela. Mm-hmm. So the time, no doubt, would come where we would have either regionally or bilaterally decide to delimit our southwestern flank with Venezuela. And there is tremendous, the Russians that did some seismic work during the PRG, And when we did our delimitation with Trinidad, it was discovered that there is some deposits of oil in Block 22. You have Block 21 and Block 22, and the line just passes above, it bisects the block, but on a 2/3, 1/3 division. We had negotiated with Trinidad and Tobago that we would do joint exploitation of the resources, but succeeding governments never pursued this. Most importantly, however, is Venezuela's claim to what we call Bird Island. It's known as Aves Island. And what is going to happen ultimately, because there's that chain, that geographical chain, Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Dominica, Martinique, Guadeloupe.
And I believe we have a maritime map that we probably can show. As you go ahead, you know, the technicians will be able to put it up.
So if we don't find a way to regionally approach Venezuela, if for no other reason, but they have come right into the Caribbean Sea by virtue of Aves Island, which is really atoll. It's a coral formation, and there's some question as to whether it has the attributes of an island so as to be afforded territorial sea, a contiguous zone, and an exclusive economic zone. If we don't take a regional approach, Venezuela would ultimately have a disproportionate maritime space around the Caribbean Sea, as far north as the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico.
Well, let's just take, and there is a map on. So we're saying that the area that we delimited with Trinidad is being shown in solid red.
Yes.
And as we look at our other territorial boundaries, those are jagged lines in blue, typically in keeping with the laws that you referenced, Anselm, but not yet negotiated with any of our partners in the region.
We have not. As a matter of fact, there's another delimitation that took place between Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, but this was specifically with respect to fisheries jurisdiction. And that is to our...
That's in keeping with all of Barbados flying fish coming from Tobago.
Precisely. and the strange thing is, and this is where stewardship with respect to the Coast Guard comes in, because it is scientifically proven that flying fish straddle boundaries, so that they spawn in Grenadian waters, but they feed and in waters that is Trinidad and Tobago, now Barbados, by virtue of the treaty between Barbados and Trinidad with respect to the exploitation of flying fish. They have been given an allowable catch. I had mentioned on one of my public comments that Grenada should have entered a third party intervening, meaning since the resource straddle boundaries to the extent at some point it's in our waters, at other points it is in Trinidad and Tobago waters, then we should be in a position to determine the allowable catch that Barbados is to get so as to avoid depletion of the stock. And no such studies have been done to determine the maximum sustainable yield per species, so that the coastal state can determine the allowable catch that each other coastal state would be entitled to under the law of the Sea Convention.
Let us bring Dexter into the conversation, and we heard all of our maritime resources, living and non-living,
Right.
the boundaries that you are to protect. So I am curious in knowing what are the assets afforded to the Royal Grenada Police Force through the Coast Guard unit in order to patrol, protect, safeguard our maritime boundaries.
Well, as we speak, Mr. Dowe, at the Coast Guard, we operate 4 platforms at the moment in terms of vessels. We have 2 that are of the interceptor type, which are, the pretty fast vessels, and they are about 33 feet in length. And we also have 2 like 40-footers, which is the near shore patrol that we can go a little further out into the deep water as we speak. But basically, that's all of the vessels that we operate at the moment. In the years gone by, we had Tyrrell Bay, which was 106 feet, but that vessel has now been decommissioned and made.
Well, up to 3 weeks ago, I saw it.
Right, underwater.
Underwater.
Underwater, right. So we no longer have, large platform as Tyrrell Bay, but it's just these operational vessels we have at the moment. Not quite sufficient for the blue water economy in terms of getting to where our fishermen normally fish, but thus far they're proven to be pretty effective in our operational strategies thus far.
Okay, if you are, and I'll go wish list now, because you say 4 vessels, 2 at the 33 feet, 2 at the 40 feet.
Right.
Is it adequate, do you believe, in responding to the responsibilities placed on the Coast Guard?
Well, we make it work, but as Mr. Griffith would have alluded to earlier on with regards to the blue economy, and we're hearing talk about the blue economy and the emphasis that is placed on the fishing community or the fishing sector, which is one of the the greatest foreign exchange earner. The fishermen, they fish 200 miles, some of them 300 miles offshore. The vessels that we have at the moment are not capable of patrolling within that fishing area. So at the moment, if we were to pay attention or to get among our fishing fleet, we need a larger platform that can take us out there so we can go out there for a week, and spend that time patrolling among them, ensuring that, let them know that we are there and they're safe and, they have that measure of security. But for our other operational purposes, we have been getting some really good success with the vessels that we have thus far.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just ask this because, we're talking maritime boundaries, maritime security. Loose question, but gentlemen, why should the ordinary Grenadian care? My name is Mark, and I'm from Digger Peace. Why should I care?
That's a very good question, because sometimes we say, out of sight, out of mind. And there's a lot of things that go on in the background of lots of things, even the country, that people are not aware that going on, but the little things make the country run. For example, let's talk about maritime security generally, how it touches everything. Maritime security it's wide enough that it encompasses one of our main income earners, also our tourism and our fishery. So the little man outside that might be thinking, okay, well, why maritime security? I'm a farmer. But the hotels is running, the ships are coming in, and everybody, it touches everybody. You just have to have, let's say, our beaches are not safe. It's maritime. All right? We don't have security in our waters. People, yachties are coming in, and they're being robbed outside there. Then you have a decline in the yachting industry. You have that, you come in here and you have people getting robbed maritime, then people say Grenada is not a safe place to go to. Okay, and then you find a decline in that. It also will, it impacts the little man in a big way, because everything really rolls down. It rolls down. And when we look at it, our maritime security, you're not only talking about your maritime security in terms of of only just a crime activity, but you're talking about maritime security in terms of your ports. What is coming into our country through your ports? Because I think I stand corrected, but I would think more than 75% of the things that come to our country come through our ports. And if we don't have good maritime security to protect our commerce, and you know, when during COVID and our ports could not have operated properly, how that impacted the whole of the country. So you can imagine that if something happens outside and the shipping is say it is too unsafe to come to Grenada, what the implications is going to be. It is going to be massive. So you have to think about it. Yes, the little man on the ground might be not really thinking about maritime security. That is so far away from it, but it rolls down and it is really big. Maritime security.
Patrick from Paradise Anselm, why should he care?
Well, because, you see, I think the Coast Guard activity ought not to be limited necessarily to search and rescue and the like. It is also to protect our bays, our harbors, from dumping, for that matter, emission of oil into the coastal zone. It touches and impacts our food security. And the only vehicle that can properly address this situation is our Coast Guard, but they're not properly constituted. Let me tell you, the fellow from St. Patrick, if we continue to destroy the mangroves, then the juvenile fish would not be able or sustainable in the rough waters. The mangroves provide placid, calm waters. The big fish come in, they spawn, the juvenile fish go out, and that's how the cycle and the chain continues. The Coast Guard ought to be able to maneuver in such a manner so as to protect our natural resources insofar as artisanal fishing is concerned. That's one aspect of it. Now, we're in the age of cyber and all kinds of sophisticated technological devices that can track fishing trawlers who come into our waters and deplete our limited resource. The Coast Guard again can ensure that such fishing trawlers who fish illegally within our waters so as to deplete our fish stock are being properly interdicted, and they have jurisdiction to find them ultimately. But we lack the resources. You have these small Coast Guard vessels. You cannot effectively deploy a Coast Guard throughout the length and breadth of Grenada, Carriacou, Petit Martinique.
Let me, if I may, just to bring Dexter in into the conversation here, and ask the same question. David from La Femme, why should he care?
Right. Good question, and it is important that David from La Femme care because, as Mr. Clouden would have just said, the porosity of our borders, we as a Coast Guard, our mandate is to protect our maritime space, but because of our limited manpower and limited resources, we cannot be everywhere at the same time. So we need to know what is happening in La Femme. We need to know what is happening in Grenville, in Telescope. We need to know what is happening in terms of maritime crimes. How do we know that? It is the community, the persons on the ground that have to partner with the Coast Guard, with the police, and that is where we get a handle on maritime security. The Coast Guard alone cannot be the maritime security entity that deals, only with maritime security. We must have regional cooperation, we must have interagency cooperation, and we must have the community involved to get a handle in terms of, policing our maritime space. So, the folks on the ground, they're important. And just to go a little further, There is this theory that Rudy Giuliani would have implemented in New York, which is community, the broken window theory of policing, whereby you fix these small crimes, you fix the broken windows before it gets into the bigger, the bigger offenses, and so too the small crimes, the small issues that are prevalent within the coastal communities. We need to get a handle on that so that it wouldn't lead to the bigger crimes, because almost all maritime crimes have their genesis from land. Mm-hmm. So it's always important to ensure that we have that connectivity on land to ensure that it doesn't basically migrate out at sea.
Osman, what are some of the typical threats related to our maritime boundaries?
All right. In terms of Grenada sits in a unique place. Grenada sits between South America, Central America, and to the north of us, we have Europe, we have North America and stuff like that. Some of these countries in the south, they're drug-producing countries. These countries that you have a lot of weapons, you have a lot of crime. The cultures are different. Drugs are illegal, and to get the best for your drugs, you need to get it to north. Grenada sits in between that, right? So Grenada, people trying to get drugs north is going to come past us, is going to come through us, is going to look for things with us there for the crime. And drugs normally, guns are associated with it, crimes are associated with it internationally, okay? You also have in this area, to the south of us, there was a lot of talk about maritime robbery and crime and stuff like that. You even hear talk about piracy, okay? This is something that we have not seen any recently, not a lot recently, but it is there. But just the threat of piracy, it puts a big damper. It puts a big damper. So you have also fishing. We talk about Mr. Cloud talk about fishing. You have a lot of illegal fishing going on in our waters, and sad to say, even Grenadians, they fish illegally in other people's waters. Because they are not aware of our maritime space. And I have been training fishermen captains recently, and when I put up our maritime boundaries, they are amazed to see this is our maritime boundaries, but we don't, we fish in here and we fish in here. I say, yeah, and that's why when sometimes you call for assistance and say, look, boy, we outside here, and the next man by me threatening me and he's speaking Spanish, and you want Coast Guard to come. Coast Guard can't physically come because that is somebody else's waters you're in. Coast Guard going to help you in that water is a no-no. And these are some of the things I say. Maritime crime outside there, there's a criminal element of it, and also there's a safety element of it. Because the thing is that Coast Guard, being a former Coast Guard commander, a lot is expected of the Coast Guard. As Mr. Cloud says, should be doing this and should be doing that and a lot of things. But in reality, Coast Guard is police officers that work on the sea. Mm-hmm. That is the basic. When you come down to talk about Coast Guard is basically police officers who work on the sea with some different allocations. All right, the powers and the thing that people look at the Coast Guard as maybe how people look at the American Coast Guard, that regulates and things like that. No, Coast Guard is not a regulator. Coast Guard is primarily police officers enforcing the law. If the law is not created to give Coast Guard it's a mandate, Coast Guard cannot enforce the law. So this is one of the things that people have to understand. Coast Guard is police officers that work on the sea, governed under the police regulations, Cap 244.
All right, and so let me bring you in here. And this is my reasoning, because we heard Osman spoke of the movement of drugs, Grenada potentially being a transshipment point. We spoke of the potential for piracy and safety in terms of traversing the seas. You mentioned initially, and he reinforced the exploitation of our living resources, meaning fishing and overfishing. Right. And now, you know, we talk about whether or not there is a professional Coast Guard service or just police officers on the sea. Yeah. So what are some of the laws, as you respond, also what are some of the laws that will govern our maritime boundaries and can be enforced in order to have the protections as mentioned?
Yeah, we have a maritime boundaries statute that deals primarily with the territorial sea. We have no laws, and this stems from the fact that, as the commandant rightly said, Coast Guard in Grenada is policemen on the sea. Coast Guard requires special training. The Coast Guard ought not to be part of the police force because the whole maritime activity is different from policing. A Coast Guard officer is someone who has gone through specialized training in, for example, navigation. That's one area. Rescue at sea in times of inclement weather. You have to be trained how you board a ship, how you salvage a situation. Then, of course, there's the requirement for in case of piracy, the Coast Guard must be in a position when they go out there, if the opposing side is combative, they must be equipped to deal with it. You may have to fire a few shots across the bow and the like, because 4 or 5 years ago there was an instance with our fishermen in Venezuela, or close to Venezuela, and they complained of piracy. They were taken captive and the like. Now, we necessarily, in this modern day, what we ought to do is create a special act that would govern Coast Guard operation separate and distinct from the police. A special administration, a special ministry that in some places it comes under transport, but it is so specialized and so necessary that they cannot be policemen on the sea. They have to be maritime trained Coast Guard personnel, petty officers, warrant officers, petty officers. Let's
come back. Let's come back to the professionalism of the Coast Guard. But it is time for our first break, viewers. So we'll take this quick break and we'll be right back.
I am VIP. I am vaccinated. I am immunized. I am protected. Our children and nation depend on vaccination for immunization. Childhood vaccination is national priority. It is their protection from disease and sicknesses. Let's all be VIPs and safeguard our beautiful Grenada. I am DJ Blackstorm and I am a VIP health champion. Be a VIP like me.
Let's all be VIP champions.
A message from the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Religious Affairs. Be a VIP Childhood Vaccination and Immunization Campaign in collaboration with UNICEF and the Pan American Health Organization.
When you need someone to help you to your feet, I'll be that beacon to your highest peak. Oh, I'll be right next to you, no, I will never leave. Come on, take my hands, we got everything we need. Cause you can look to me, yes, I can. Whenever you're in need, yes, you can. Just call on me and I'll be on my way. I'll be by your side.
Credit Union, with you wherever your road leads.
Oh, island in the sun. Look at how we've grown, how far we've run. 50 years we strong and more to come. More to come. More to come. We're going higher. 50 years we're blessed, we're forged in fire. Still reaching for more. Going up, going up, 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 up. Going up, going up, going up, 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 up. We're going higher.
Welcome back. We're talking maritime boundaries, maritime security. We're extending Grenada beyond the land, but the land still is important. And next, let me bring you in here. We had a couple of comments. Coast Guard, policemen on the sea, and there was a call for a professional Coast Guard unit along with other resources. Respond.
Well, Mr. Griffith is right in the sense that we are all police officers. Our mandate is just out on the sea instead of on the land. And to say that we are not professionally trained is incorrect, right? Mr. Clouden made mention about the petty officer rank, right? Now, we don't carry the maritime rank or the Coast Guard rank as in petty officer and chiefs and warrant officer as the case may be, but we have the equivalent in terms of the police rank, right? So, like on my shoulders right now, you're saying this rank here, right? I'm an inspector of police within the RGPF, but in the maritime field, that is a sub-lieutenant rank. You know, so that's the equivalent with regards to that. And in terms of the training, we are the Coast Guard, we are highly trained to perform our job out at sea, right? We are search and rescue professionals in terms of creating search and rescue plans and stuff like that. With regards to maritime law, many of us are trained in terms of the maritime law. All of the UNCLOS and the SOLAS Convention and the ISPS Code, we are very familiar with these bits of legislation because it impacts us directly, you know. So not having the rank as per maritime and being attached to the RGPF doesn't necessarily mean that we are not professionals and that we are not fully trained. I myself am a trained navigator. I've been through the United States Quartermaster School and through the officer school where you learn straight, basic, pure navigation. I can calculate position using the sun and the moon and the stars. That's the training, that's the level of training we have at the Coast Guard. So to say that we are not, qualified or not, fully trained is an incorrect statement. We are. It's just the fact that we are not autonomous in the sense that we are, detached from the RGPF and is a standalone unit as regular Coast Guard.
But let me ask: is this a direction that we should move? And I don't know whether it is in your place to say that because you're not commissioner. But just in terms of, I will challenge you as the officer in charge of the Coast Guard, the transference of one, and this is one of the fears that we have as a Grenadian, whether we're talking transfers into the Coast Guard or transferred into immigration. On Monday morning, somebody harassing, that's Grenadian terms now, police officer harassing a bus driver by the market, right, or in the bus terminal. And then on Wednesday, they're in Coast Guard, or they're in fire, or they're in immigration. What type of training goes in prior to that placement in order to ensure a professional response? And my listening to Mr. Clouden was more one of we need the individuals being trained for placement as opposed to being placed and then receiving training. How do you respond to that?
Well, in the absence of a standalone Coast Guard unit whereby Coast Guard does their own recruitment, if Coast Guard has the opportunity to do its own recruitment, then we can recruit persons directly into the Coast Guard who have the necessary skills that we need to fill gaps. If not, we bring in fresh persons and then we train them in the area where we need them to be trained. But as Mr. Griffith said, we are all police officers, right? So we all have, must come through the RGPF, go to training school as police officers, and then we are allotted to the different areas. And that is how it is at the moment. In 2000, we made an effort to recruit directly for Coast Guard. So there was a specific recruitment specifically for Coast Guard. So we brought in persons with specific skills that were pertinent to Coast Guard, and that didn't happen for quite a while. But hopefully that should be something that could be inbuilt into the training paradigm going forward.
I can ask you as one, you're retired, so you can say what you want.
Yes.
but the idea is, even if not a standalone separate unit, and you can respond to whether or not you believe that is the best practice. Dexter just mentioned recruiting specifically for Coast Guard.
Yes.
And in so doing, I'd also like to add the protection of the training one would have received. Because one, you'll want to have the requisite skills coming in, but you also want to protect the investment you would have made in training, that tomorrow morning the individual don't get transferred out and then in fire.
Colin, it's a catch-22 situation with Coast Guard people, because as you say, you don't want the person transfer out, but then you go into Coast Guard and you become a specialist. You go in there, you trained, and you make yourself valuable to your detriment, because Coast Guard is a small unit. And you go to Coast Guard and you become, let's say you become the best navigator, you become the best coxswain. Nobody is going to transfer you out of Coast Guard, but you're not going to get promoted because there's no space above you. And the man that is outside, that is less trained than you, will be your colleague, who is less trained than you, is being promoted over you, because nobody's going to move you out of Coast Guard, because we watch now, we train that man, and that man really good, and we can't move him from Coast Guard. But he can't move. He can't progress in his career. And then you find that there's frustration. So you train sometimes you train people to their detriment. And because they become so valuable to this unit, especially like Coast Guard, nobody will transfer them out.
Does the staffing orders have a limit in terms of the number of ranks that can be in the unit? In other words, three inspectors, one.
Yes.
So there's a cap.
There's a cap. So once that reach, that's what I'm saying. Once that reach, there's your colleagues. In order for you to move up, you need to go out. I was in Coast Guard and I moved out. And I went back to Coast Guard. But what I'm saying, they comes when all the slots are filled. That is it. You're not going anywhere, no matter how good you are. And then you see your same colleague is on the outside, is moving up.
Right.
But you still even more qualified than him. But you stagnated. So these are some of the my vision, right? And as I say, that is, I'm not speaking on behalf of the RGPF. I'm not speaking, on behalf of Coast Guard. I'm speaking as a subject matter expert. I believe we can form a unit within Grenada by merging SSU and Coast Guard.
Okay.
If you merge SSU and Coast Guard, because in the earlies we used to have a lot of guys from SSU in Coast Guard and back and forth. So if you have these two units merged together, then you have more cross-pollination, and you have more room for growth, that these people can go back and forth. All right, that you merge these two units maybe as a special entity, okay, and you have them there. So I believe that's probably one of the good options you can have.
Okay, Slam, just lead us in terms of discussing a few threats. Drug trafficking.
Yeah.
How do we respond? Are we responding appropriately?
Yeah, well, in recent times, we have had some rather unfortunate incursions in our sovereign space. For example, guys came from Trinidad and Tobago and raided a bank in Carriacou. Some fellas came in a woman, it is said, and killed somebody and got back out. No, how the Coast Guard, in the Carriacou instance, they were moved with alacrity and eventually apprehended the robbers. But this is where you need unmanned aerial surveillance, because you can be here, there, and everywhere at the same time. You can't be in PD Martinique and be in Woburn. We have limited resources. So we have to think about Coast Guard as a specialized unit within the apparatus of national security. And to do that, we would have to take the bull by the horn, find the money somewhere, move it on a regional basis with St. Vincent Coast Guard, St. Lucia Coast Guard. We have highly specialized units in each of these sovereign states that cooperate among ourselves to avoid piracy, to avoid that type of international transshipment of criminals from one jurisdiction to another, and the Coast Guard cannot handle it necessarily without some technological assistance. And that assistance in this day and age must come from unmanned aerial surveillance. And the point to the Coast Guard where this interdiction ought to take place, and the Coast Guard goes out very equipped. In the event that they encounter retaliation, they must be in a position to defend themselves.
Let me just ask Dexter this. The Coast Guard today, tell us, use of drones. I believe that was one of the strategies used where the robbers from Carriacou, not from Carriacou, the robbers in Carriacou from Trinidad were captured. But the use of drones, is this widespread for the Grenada Coast Guard at this point?
We have drones within the RGPF. At the Coast Guard, we don't operate drones at the Coast Guard, per se, the Coast Guard having drones, but the RGPF has drones. And I can't really speak to our operational thing, but
Understood.
the fact is, drones is critical, right? It is critical when you're looking at marine domain awareness, knowing what is happening out within your maritime space. Grenada's maritime space encompasses over 16,000 kilometers of sea space. It's a large area, and woefully we do not have the resources to actually police that that large space. And there is a saying in the maritime security circles: what you cannot see, you cannot police. So if you don't have the eyes and the ears out there, it's difficult for us to police. But despite our limited resources, we would have had some measurable successes. For example, last year, we would have seized over $3 million worth of drugs with our limited resources that we have at the moment. So what we normally do going forward, and what we would have done in the past, is to have this regional cooperation.
Before you get there, one question pops to mind immediately. You say last year, 2023,
Right.
I believe you're referring to.
That's correct.
The RGPF, working through the Coast Guard, would have captured about 3 million, this is EC dollars or US dollars?
EC dollars.
EC dollars worth of drugs.
Yes.
I'm certain that there's a study that says if you capture 3 million, X number got away. What's that number?
I don't have an answer to that one. I don't have an answer to that one. I only know of what we capture, and given our limited resources, that is significant.
Yes.
$3 million dollars worth of drugs is quite a bit of drugs to get off the street. But yes, lack of resources is a hindrance to basically policing your maritime your maritime space. And even the richest country, as American, them do not have all the resources that they need. So that is where you find the cooperation, the interagency. For example, all the different agencies within Grenada, must be brought to bear to have that maritime focus, whether it be immigration, customs, fisheries, health, whatever it is, So there must be that interoperability and complementarity between agencies.
Okay, let me ask. So whenever we think maritime, we're talking in protection of borders, we think drug trafficking. Is human smuggling a problem in Grenada or within Grenadian waters?
It happens infrequently, but it's not a major problem that we have here in terms of a maritime security issue. We are not seeing the data to sustain that thesis.
Okay. Illegal immigration. Is that an issue?
No.
I have not seen anything much with illegal immigration. You find a lot of the illegal immigration and things that you find is most coming out of places like Haiti, and the Haitians are going north or into the U.S. Virgin Islands and the UK territories. We're not seeing a lot of people coming south because Grenada is pretty much way down south. So we're not seeing people coming south. People are tending to go north to America and do.
Are we seeing any movement of Venezuelans?
Venezuelans, it seems like it is stopping in most instances, stopping in Trinidad. I'm not coming further up because Grenada is a small place, and a Spanish-speaking person in Grenada would stick out like a sore thumb. You know, it'll be easy for, you know, somebody to say immigration. Hey, wait, who's this person? Who are you coming to? Things like that.
But will someone say immigration? Look at Tom. Look at Jaime or Tomas.
Yes. I mean, we in Grenada. You know, the thing is that when you look at crime in Grenada, even maritime or whatever, a lot of times, especially when it impacts the community, people tend to talk. People would say something. People will say something, especially you see if somebody coming here. Look, who is this person? What is this person? We don't know if this person is a criminal. You know, they will talk. They will talk because. Despite of what we think, we have let's say about 1,000 police in Grenada. They're related to somebody. Somebody would mention something, and somebody would say something. But in terms of what Robbie was saying about the resources, my whole thing on resources for Coast Guard, if you look over the years, I believe that the only government, I'm not a government that has ever.
Government is continuous, by the way.
Yes. Only government era, I'm talking about era, that has ever bought any significant maritime resources to Grenada was back when I think the government bought what you call Smokey Joe, the rescuer. And then after that, no other government has ever. We had all got donations. Every single maritime asset that we have, every boat that we have is a donation from somebody. And that is you know, that's what I'm saying is that our governments, well, you say government is a continuity. From since when has not looked at our maritime security with that criticality that they say we need to invest in it. St. Vincent has blue water capability. Why? Because the boats that they own, the government put it. Barbados, the government, and they have, but the other countries that are, the countries like Grenada and stuff like that, that we do not have blue water capability because we depend on our big brothers, the Americans, to give us Tyrrell Bay, to give us the other boats during the revolution was donated by the Libyans. All those boats, the Vosper boats, was the Libyans gave us. Then you have after that, it's from Tyrrell Bay, and all of these boats coming down is the U.S. are giving us those boats. But to say that Grenada has invested what significance Grenada has invested in the maritime resources, I don't know. Look, Coast Guard base, the UK gave us it. You know, it's always somebody else giving us it. And we have to understand, as a country, we're independent 50 years now. We need to look seriously at our maritime security and safety.
Just to pick up on what you said.
Yes.
Not too long ago, a group of Haitians tried to enter the country. They came by plane. They were refugees. We are not signatory to the Refugee Convention. Evidently, they didn't land. But the point is, we have to be prepared. I mean, you know, preparedness is important. And looking in futuro, looking at the future, we must harness our maritime resources and express it through our Coast Guard. That is the vehicle to provide us with the necessary national security we need as a coastal state. Apart from the land, you know, the coastal state has certain responsibilities to protect national security.
Give us some
We could be
examples.
invaded.
Give us some examples as to how we should go about guarding against the illegal exploitation of our resources. Whether we're talking fish, whether we're talking our hydrocarbon assets, etc.
Well, just as the commandant here said, we would have to divert resources to, as it were, build a Coast Guard command station where you have, they can deploy smaller Coast Guard vessels to do the necessary surveillance of our bays, inlets, and harbors. That takes resources. And that's the answer, Colin. We have to make that commitment for our own security. Fish, if we don't do proper surveillance of our fishing resources, they will be depleted, and before long we would have to import fish. Already some of the fishermen have said they have to go so far northeast, in almost the mid-Atlantic, as the commandant said, in excess of our national jurisdiction to get the tuna, because you have so many boats fishing not only in international waters too, that they're depleting the stock, and as such, it affects our food security, because eventually, if we don't keep a vigilant surveillance of our living resources, of our sovereign maritime space, we would deplete it and we'd have to import fish. Just as we now import bananas, we would one day have to import fish. And the Coast Guard is the vehicle to ensure that our sovereign marine space is being protected. And to do that, they must be properly equipped with guns, deck guns, as the case may be. It's a military organization. The Coast Guard is not a police, it's a maritime military organization that does maritime work.
I see the way he's smiling, so I certainly want him to comment.
Yeah, it's good. It's good, Mr. Claude, that the Coast Guard, yes, the Coast Guard is coming in now. Is the premier maritime, response agency within the island, but I think we kind of are putting the cart before the horse here, in the sense that, in the absence of a national maritime security strategy, how do we plan ahead for all the things that Coast Guard needs to do? What is there in legislation or policy that clarifies roles and responsibility for the various institutions and agencies within Grenada with a maritime interface? You know what I'm saying? So, having a national maritime security strategy would basically guide the whole process. That Coast Guard need to be more, beef up more in capacity and capabilities. So you give us the bigger platforms, you give us more men, you give us the drones and the systems that we could listen out at sea with, and all them kind of a different stuff like that. Then you give clear demarcation in terms of roles. So Coast Guard is responsible for this. Then you have Port Authority for this. Then you have fisheries for that. And once we have that going forward, I think we will get a better handle on our maritime security space. But as we speak, we have international convention and laws that Grenada is signatory to. But is it harmonized into our local laws, Mr. Clouden? Right?
Well,
are they harmonized?
A lot of it, and I've been clamoring for example, just a Coastal Zone Management Act, okay, that would regulate the development of our coastal resources. We don't have that. So people build on the waterfront, some buildings are literally in the sea, destroy the beaches, destroy the ecosystem, destroy the marine habitat. you need laws for that. Similarly, you need laws that would regulate, for example, search and rescue. How you deploy Coast Guards, you have certain sailing activity, fishing activity. The Coast Guard must be present in case of some accident at sea. It is a Coast Guard mandated to deploy a rescue mission, as the case may be. So that it is for that reason we need a separate and distinct unit within the government apparatus that is specifically Coast Guard, recruiting for Coast Guard, training for Coast Guard, deployment of marine resources, Coast Guard. Command Center, Coast Guard. And we have to move away from the Coast Guard being part of the police. They're not and cannot be, cannot function. This is why we're not functioning properly.
One thing that was just mentioned, let me, before I say that, are you of the view that Coast Guard remains a punishment stop for some police officers? I know it's been said in the past that if you misbehave, you either go to fire or you go to Coast Guard.
Yeah.
Well, apart from being sent to Carriacou.
Well, that has been. Colin, I don't want to get into that. But what I want to emphasize is the fact that, look, you see what is happening around us. We need to have a specialized unit specifically referable to marine activity. Plain and simple. It's both facto. And what is happening in the police force and what is happening here and there, it happens because we do not have the proper mechanism to regulate our marine space and defend our marine space. I mean, suppose you have piracy at sea, you send the Coast Guard out. These guys are not equipped. These boats are not equipped to handle a situation of combat in the high seas. So we have to start rethinking the model. And I think we have to divorce the Coast Guard from the police for reasons even given by the commandant here. Inertia takes place there. Your colleagues in the police, they are moving forward, and you stagnant. That must change if we are to move forward.
All right, it's time for our final break, so we will have a brief break, and when we come back, 440-1252, that's the number. We certainly want to hear from you.
Agritech Limited Grenada is your one-stop shop for all your farming needs. We provide seeds and seedlings, pesticides, fertilizers, irrigation and water management systems, veterinary products, and a wide range of agricultural products and implements. Our staff is knowledgeable and ready to serve you. Call us on 435-9677 or 440-4460 or visit us in Happy Hill, St. George. We are open Monday to Saturday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and on Sundays, 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. Agritech Limited Grenada. Come grow with us.
Your new Grenlec bill is even easier to read and still has all the valuable information you need to track and manage your usage.
Hey Mom, okay, your friendly tech support is here. So you got the new Grenlec bill? Let's take a look. The new bill makes it even easier to see your bill total, the due date, and much more. And take a closer look. It actually is a lot easier to understand. Let me show you. You can still see exactly what the charges are for, but in a great new format, it even shows how the cost of generating and delivering the electricity to you is calculated using your actual usage. And Mom, let Lucy know she can check out Grenlec's new Understanding Your Bill video. Anyway, look who says hi, and see you soon.
Your new Grenlec bill, easier to understand and easier to track your usage.
Welcome back to this January 22nd edition of Beyond the Headlines, and we're talking maritime boundaries, maritime security. We certainly would want to hear from you. 440-1252, that's the number to call. Just before our first caller, let's speak search and rescue, because this came up as in the importance of it, the training for it. Let's hear from you.
Well, search and rescue is very critical, especially within the maritime security context, maritime safety. And we would like when our fishermen, when they go out to sea, that they return safely. That's why on many occasions we will even come here at GBN and other platforms and express our concerns with regards to the safety precautions that fishermen should take when they go out to sea. And sad to say, many of them woefully are lacking in that regard in terms of the equipment and the best practices that we educate them on, that they don't implement it. Even right now, as we speak, we have 2 persons that have been missing since December, and they're yet to be found. And we have done all that we can do from a local perspective and also from a regional perspective, and thus far they have not, turned up. And we understand and we empathize with the family in the sense that their loved ones are missing and there is no closure. So that's why it is important for the fishing community or the boating community that they observe the safety precautions.
What are you referring? Are you referring to radios, flares, GPS mapping,
exactly.
Life jackets?
Exactly. All of these things that would give you that added assurance, that added, chance of getting back home, extra fuel. Because sometimes you take fuel just to go from here to there to fish. But when you go over there, the fish is not biting there, so you go across there, but you don't have no fuel to come back. So it is important. Also, you need to alert persons as to where you are when you're fishing. If you change from a particular spot, you need to let them know where is the next spot that you're going, because the last position is where we're going to go. But all the time you're not there, you're over in somewhere else. So it is important. All of these little bits of information that the boating public needs to be aware of, so that when they go out there, they can come back home safely. The life jackets, many of them use it to sit on it, and that causes it to to lose its buoyancy. So when in time of need they put it on, it cannot sustain the body weight in the water. So they tend to maybe sink.
Speaking of life jackets, I'll come back to that. Let's take the first caller. So good evening, caller, and welcome.
Good evening to the host and good evening to the guests. Very interesting information coming out there. Just more proof how inefficient and incompetent the state of Grenada has been over the years in almost everything. And while we that, I'd like to make a pedantic observation, both to you, Mr. Dowe, and the gentleman from the Coast Guard. If you tell me that you would have captured $3 million worth of cocaine and all of that, never happened. I wish that you pay attention to the use of that verbal structure would have plus the past participle part. And now to the meat of the matter, and my question is directed to Mr. Cloud. Greetings, Anselm. Can you confide, sir, confirm or deny that a part of our second island in size, geographical size, Carriacou, according to the current boundaries, belong to St. Vincent and the Grenadines? If this be so, sir, can you give us a briefing on the history and your views on how we can clarify this issue?
Thank you very much.
To establish the integrity of the country. Thank you very much.
So let me just, thank you very much, caller. The question is directed towards Mr. Clouden, and it is whether or not you can confirm or deny that a part of Carriacou actually belongs to St. Vincent. If it is true, the history, and how can we work to ensure that the state of Grenada's integrity is protected?
Yeah. Well, that is a fallacy. As a matter of fact, a sea boundary can't run on land. It's impossible. It doesn't happen that way. There are baselines from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured. But it is from land to sea but it could never run on the land. A boundary is a maritime boundary. So this fallacy existed since I was a boy in Caribou. So, you know, sometimes you're in class in these discussions, and I decided to throw it out to my professor at Dalhouse. So I said, Professor, we have a situation in Caribou where St. Vincent is claiming part of Gunpoint. And he found it rather interesting. He said, is Gunpoint a land or is Gunpoint part of the ocean? I said, it's land. He said, a maritime boundary could never run on land, Mr. Clouden. And so it cannot happen. It is just a fallacy. These islands were under colonial rule, and you know, the British and we all under the same imperial administration. So I don't know where this thing originated from, but it's an impossibility, and it could never exist. So Caribou is safe. No country has ever staked a claim of St. Vincent, for that matter, to Gunpoint. It has never arisen in the jurisprudence of maritime boundaries.
Okay, we have another caller on line. Good evening, caller, and welcome.
Good evening. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yeah, my point is to the inspector and also to support Mr. Clouden point. So if the police is attached to the Coast Guard, I think the Coast Guard should have a station in all parishes as well for search and rescue.
Okay. Yes, I got that. Gentlemen, I don't know, but this is directed to you, Inspector. And the point is, if the Coast Guard is attached to the Royal Grenada Police Force, like other arms of the Royal Grenada Police Force, you should have a base in every parish. How would you respond?
It's impossible to have a base in every parish, maybe given the geographical nature of the course, right? Because first and foremost, you would have to build a port to put your vessels, and it's not all parishes that have that accessible coastline where you can build a port. You're looking at safety of your vessel as well when you have surging tides, as the case may be, and it's impossible to do that. Resources, because you would have to have manpower, you would have to have vessels for each and every parish, and that's basically somewhat impossible. Now, what you can do is to place assets strategically in certain areas, and it may not necessarily be vessels. For example, raiders, coastal raiders, you can put, because there is one up in Livera, right? So you can put raiders, which is an asset just as well, where you can have a surface picture as to vessels coming in from the north, coming down into Grenada. So it may be impossible, caller, to have a Coast Guard presence in every parish. Nevertheless, we do patrols, daily patrols, nightly patrols, where we, basically do right around the territory of Grenada.
Let me specifically ask, what type of assets do you have deployed in Carriacou and Petit Martinique?
As we speak, we have one of our interceptors deployed in Carriacou, stationed in Carriacou permanently.
Okay. And what does it makes? Well, help me to make sense of it. You have Carriacou, you have Petit Martinique, you have Union Island, which belongs to St. Vincent.
Right.
Are we making sense in trying to distinguish maritime boundaries when you basically can swim from St. Vincent to Grenada?
Well, maritime boundaries are important in the sense that what is yours in law, and what is mine in law, and international law, clearly demarcate, boundary lines. There mightn't be much maritime space up at the north between the islands because we are what we call archipelagic states. So whatever water is between those islands, you basically share it in half. But the thing is, if, as Mr. Clouden would have said earlier on, hot pursuit, that is a term in law where if we start chasing a vessel from Carriacou and they run into Union Island waters, the law gives us the right to pursue them because the chase originated within our national jurisdiction, so we can do that. And within the RSS treaty, it is okay to do that. All we have to do is to call St. Vincent and let them know that we are entering their territorial seas with regards to hot pursuit, and it's okay. So that we have that cooperation within the RSS and within our neighbors to do that.
Speak a little bit more on the cooperation and collaboration between the agencies regionally.
Well, regional agencies, well, you have the bigger agencies like CDEMA and them in terms of disasters. But within a maritime context, we're more looking at RSS, the regional security system, where an attack on one is an attack on all, and they would deploy the maritime resources as well as their land forces based on the need that the particular countries are having at the time. And from time to time, you have patrols. So Barbados would use their vessel, and they would patrol a certain sector. They would come down to Grenada, and what we would do, we would put on board their vessel someone from the Grenada Coast Guard, who we call a sea rider. So once they're patrolling within the Grenada's territorial seas, that person on board, that Grenadian on board, provides jurisdiction. Right. So in case there is any interdiction within that zone, even though it's a Barbadian vessel, we still have jurisdiction. Okay. So that cooperation is there, within the RSS structure as we speak.
Okay. Mr. Clouden, just the ship rider agreement, because we talk about the cooperation, let's say a Barbados vessel coming in, but there's a Grenadian on board. I think the 1996 Accords, I don't know that we necessarily have that, but I believe we have a caller online. So let me take that caller, and then I'll come back to your response on ship rider. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. And I'm full in support of what Mr. Clouden is trying to explain there to you. Because, for instance, if a Coast Guard from St. Vincent come here, you look at it, you have to open your mouth and watch it. Same as Barbados. We supposed to have at least 3 Coast Guards, 2 of the size of Tyrrell Bay and a bigger one. And for the Coast Guard system now, with these Venezuelan pirates and other pirates, you have to put, it's like you're handling the Somali pirates on the sea. The guns they have is powerful. They're very aggressive. And these men are not ordinary men like where you might say you have a police Coast Guard and boat. A lot of these men are ex-soldiers, been in the army from thing, and they turn pirates. They get real serious gunners. So you have to have almost like a fighting force on the sea. And you can't have a Coast Guard. We have to have a Coast Guard maybe somewhere just a little under Governor's Island with how much men on board. They don't have to come to show every day. When these men place on the sea and they're there, when they get a call, they're outside. These small boats are running up and down there. You can't handle these men. From my experience with these Venezuelans with these guns and them, they're serious, and our fishermen always get in problem. It have boats that say when they're traveling, going that side in the night especially, you can't use light because the pirates will know where you are. And I'm glad that what you all mentioned, that the best Coast Guard system we have was with the Smoky Joe, where you call it the rescuer. And then you recall, who was the man that bring that into Grenada? Sir Eric Gary. That is the man that had all the things for Grenada, doing everything. Independence, everything for Grenada. But it seemed that was the worst man. There's no man in this world that have everything good. We all have 2 sides, a good side and a bad side. Everything the world made with 2. And even look at things, even seaplane. Sir Eric Gary brings seaplane into Grenada so that people can know what a seaplane is. You have a time that they had some men that go adrift the seaplane, even get involved and try to help. So we have to think differently. We're living in war.
Thank you very much, caller. And basically, there's support for Mr. Clouden's point on the need, well, both yourself and Mr. Griffith, the need for an added investment within the Coast Guard. Caller pointed out that when the Barbados Coast Guard comes to Grenada and Vincent, it's the envy, and also suggesting that we probably should have not only one the size of Tyrrell Bay, but one bigger, a minimum of 5 vessels in order for us to be able to do our work well. That's a comment. But Mr. Colin, I just want you to respond to the ship riders agreement and the idea that if a U.S. Coast Guard is in pursuit of illicit drugs, and is the claim, they can come within our territorial waters. But here we have, when in terms of the RSS, we have a Grenadian providing jurisdiction on the Barbados Coast Guard, and so it seems to have different levels there.
But you see, all of that is mustered in the Mutual Assistance Treaty between the United States and Grenada. I don't know if it obtains with other Commonwealth Caribbean countries, but that permits them to come into our jurisdiction, apprehend boats and apprehend persons who are dealing in drugs and other related illegal substances. They can do that with impunity by virtue of the Mutual Assistance Treaty. It gives them a blanket, open access to our jurisdiction.
Okay. But we also do embark persons on the U.S. Coast Guard as well, or the U.S. boats when they come in the region. Okay. So once they're operating within the Grenada's territorial waters, we do embark a Grenadian officer on board as well.
Okay, all right. I believe we have another call online, do we? Okay, no further caller. Osmond, if you can just share with us some of the things that we would like to see moving forward. We address the empowerment of the Coast Guard unit, and whether it means through an amalgamation of SSU and the Coast Guard is one of the ideas that you presented. But as we move forward and we think of our maritime assets and both maritime security and the protection of our maritime boundaries, what are some of the other recommendations you'd make?
Yes. Well, I support what Robbie had said. We need a maritime strategy. All right, a national maritime strategy which will drive where we go with this, the different entities, and because when you look at the security aspects of what Coast Guard is doing, Coast Guard, you can take different entities. Port, provide security for your shipping. Fisheries, provide security there. Tourism, okay, sustainable development, blue economy, and all of these entities has an element where it requires Coast Guard assistance for it to run properly. Now, police budget, Coast Guard money comes out of police budget, but Coast Guard is supporting a lot of other entities, okay? And Coast Guard, any maritime is an expensive thing to run. When I used to run Turtle Bay, I mean, as captain of Turtle Bay, and when I tell people, if we run in Turtle Bay, you're talking about, it's not like a car, miles per gallon, 90 gallons of diesel per hour. That is what you're talking about, a bigger boat takes, and sometimes more. It is not cheap, and that is, I'm just talking about fuel. Right. You're not talking about maintenance. You're talking about when you go to refit, you're talking about $250,000 easy just to pull it out and do the bottom and do things like that. It's not cheap to run vessels. It's not cheap to run boats. So it takes a lot of resources. That being said, the way forward is that we can't keep thinking about what it cost us. We have to start thinking about what is it going to cost us if we don't do it. It's not what is going to cost us now. What is this going to cost us if we don't do this? It's going to cost us a lot more if we don't do it than if we do it. And that is, to me, that is what we have to get the people that hold the purse strings to understand. That we need a maritime strategy. We are a small, and the reality is, we are a small island developing state.
Do you believe that the COP, whoever the COP may be, truly understands the value of the Coast Guard to the RGPF, 1, and 2 to Grenada, and therefore makes the necessary agitations, whether it is up the line, through the line minister, or down in terms of empowerment of officers?
Well, as I say, at that level, I don't know what talks it has at that level. But over the years, we've had some very senior Coast Guard officers who were at the very top of the of the administration within the RGPF. So I would have expected that they would have, in fact, commanders of Coast Guard were at the top of the RGPF, you know, and I would expect them to, you know, wave the flag and say, look, this is what we need. So I'm expecting them to advise the commissioner, but I don't know where it goes from that. But that being said, tends that people get frightened when, for example, when I have to put forward a budget for an annual budget for Coast Guard, and I you know, and you look at it, you say, what? You know, because it is really exorbitant. When we had Tyrrell Bay and I called for fuel, I am putting something like 1,005 gallons of diesel into Tyrrell Bay. So you know, you understand that, and then you're talking about burning the 90 gallons of diesel per hour, and you know and you say, well, wait now, this. So it frightens people, and we had where we had America subsidizing a lot of this, that is gone now. But our government has not stepped in and filled the gap. So you find that a lot of little things. You cut this, you cut this, you cut this, you cut this, until you're staring at where, whoa.
And one life saved is probably worth
yes.
a lot more.
And as Robbie said already, is that search and rescue is one of the primary responsibilities of Coast Guard. And a lot of people will think, oh, you know, it's only drugs. Coast Guard go over there and they take. But if Coast Guard is doing an interdiction, a drug interdiction, and a search and rescue comes up, they drops it immediately. There's Robbie here. I mean, he can confirm it. We have done that as I'm speaking from a Coast Guard commander perspective. Life is more important than anything else. You know, it takes precedence over interdiction, crime interdiction. But as I say, going forward, we have to take and as I say, Robbie's right. One of the things that will drive anything that we do with Coast Guard is that people have to get down, the stakeholders have to get down together and decide a common maritime strategy. Because, I mean, we can't wait too long. We can't wait too long. If tomorrow a company decides to drill for oil in Grenadian waters, we do not have the capability to secure it, that platform. And
as we come to closing, your wish for maritime security, Anselm?
Well, as I've said, we need to have a Coast Guard division, which is a separate and distinct entity with a command center that is highly technological. And we need to have training regionally, I think, because we can ill afford to train petty officers, warrant officers, commanding officers, and have that pecking order. As I say, it's akin to a military establishment, and it must function as such. So that you need to improve on the facilities throughout. The boating facility, you need a helicopter. I mean, little ships come in, little yachts with their own helicopters. So we need to train Coast Guard officers in pilots. They can use seaplanes, small aircrafts, because our coast is being exposed to all kinds of illegal activities. We have seen it. People come in, they rob banks in the days of the Wild West. They kill and they disappear. If we have our technology in place, a training facility, cooperation with other coastal states in the OECS and the larger CARICOM area to protect the Caribbean Sea and ensure that it remains a zone of peace, we can diminish the amount of drug trafficking and the type of drugs. I mean, marijuana is now internationally acceptable, so there's no need to run down fellows doing the little inter-island trade. The demand is here, but hard drugs coming out of Colombia and using Grenada as a conduit, I think we have to clamp down on that, and the only way we can clamp down on it is by having a Coast Guard that is technologically innovative and with readiness and preparedness to deal with securing our borders from, criminal activity.
Okay. And Dexter, I will close with you in terms of your wish list. I know you mentioned the importance of the legislative and policy framework that will be able to define roles and hopefully identify resources. But, in the immediate, that should be an immediate,
exactly.
But let's go some immediate and medium-term wishes.
Well, immediate, I would say resources, because maritime security is all about knowing what is happening out there in the maritime domain. You must have that awareness of the sort of criminal activities that are happening out there. And you must have the resources, whether it be the drones, the AIS systems, the coastal radars, the deep water platforms, whatever it is, we must have that, so that we can have that awareness and strategize for short, medium, and long term. We must have the capability to function in all state of weather, whether it be sun, it rain, whatever it is. We have to have that capability to function. And I know presently at the Coast Guard we have highly trained men and women.
What is your how many officers do you have?
Well, we are around 49 in terms of our nominal list. But within that figure, we have highly skilled individuals that are capable of going out there and functioning. It's just that we need to have, the tools, the resources that will even make us function better. Because what we have at the moment, we are working it and making it work for us and getting good successes. But all in all, it all boils down to that strategy. And, I would love to see a maritime security strategy in place that guides the process, that guides maritime security as we go along.
Okay. Inspector Dexter Roberts, Attorney Anselm Clouden, and Osborne Griffith, you'll have the last word.
Yes, just one thing. Just before we go, I know you say, I would like to use this platform to just on behalf of the Coast Guard to maybe somebody listening that can help now. Coast Guard barracks had a fire which destroyed part of the barracks. Quite a long time now. The guys, nothing has been done really. The guys are still suffering down there. So this is just a plea to do something to get these guys' barracks back up and running again. Okay. To fix it.
Osborne Griffith, once from the Coast Guard, always from the Coast Guard. Thank you, gentlemen, for a very enlightening conversation. And thank you, viewers, for being with us on this January 22nd edition of Beyond the Headlines. It was an absolute pleasure hosting this evening, and I look forward to being with you again 6 days, 22.5 hours from now. See you then. Godspeed.